Hello guys, Charles here and welcome back to my channel. So since getting my 7-string guitar, I've had a few questions about how to tune the low B string, more specifically which note to tune it to. One of the more recent questions came from someone who was asking why I choose a B tuning for my bottom string, and guys like George Van Epps, John and Bucky Pizzarelli both tuned down to A. So I thought I'd kind of talk about this today. These questions reminded me that I did actually spend some time thinking about this when my guitar was first ordered, and when I was spending the first few weeks with it. I did actually experiment with a few different tunings, so if you are lucky enough to have a 7-string guitar on its way, maybe these ideas might be things to think about and experiment with. So the first and possibly most obvious thing would be, well, why did you buy a 7-string guitar in the first place? Personally, I bought this guitar because I was looking for a 6-string, I was looking for an HH7, and this particular guitar happened to be on sale in the Kiesel store, and it was just, for me, the most beautiful wood I'd ever seen, and I thought, well, I may as well get it, with a 7-string or not. So it just happened to be a 7-string guitar. I wasn't looking for a 7-string guitar. However, you might have wanted a 7-string guitar and chosen one very specifically. So which players are you into and what do they recommend tuning-wise? Which songs did you want to play? I did have a phase when I was probably 14 or 15 where I really did want a 7-string guitar, and it's because I wanted to play the Glass Prism. So obviously I would have tuned to B for that. So that's the first thing to ask is, well, what are you hoping to play? The other thing is it more riff-based or is it more chord-based? Because that might come into the equation as well. We'll talk about chords in a moment. Now, like I say, I did experiment with several tunings, and one of the things I realised, which I hadn't really thought about because I'm not really a very spec kind of guy. I know a lot of YouTubers, they care about the exact nanomillimeters of their frets and all that sort of thing. I kind of just accept a guitar with all of its faults and flaws and the things that are nice about it and learn to play with it. So I'm not really one of these people who cares about scale length or nut width or anything like that. But one thing I did notice in experimenting was, because this guitar is a fixed scale throughout, a fixed scale length, the low B string can just be a little bit flappy if you tune it any lower. It's a bit flappy anyway, to be honest. It's a little bit on the flappy side, but I don't generally riff and play this hard. If I was wanting to riff, I would need more tension. Now, I have put a thicker string than what came from the factory. Again, don't ask me the specifics of that. I just know I've gone up a couple of gauges. I couldn't tell you the exact gauge I'm on, but the gauge it came with was a bit too flappy for me. So I've got a tension that I'm pleased with, I'm happy with a flat wound, actually, low B string. And when I play gently, it holds its tuning lovely, but of course, if I give it too much, well, it's going to play sharp. If you have a fixed scale length guitar, then of course you need to consider that in the string tension of that in the equation. However, as we've seen a lot of nowadays, you can get fan frets and multi-scale guitars where you're a lot longer to combat that string tension issue, a bit like a grand piano does, where the longer side of the grand piano is for the bass strings. So it keeps the tension really nice. So again, you've probably got more options if you do have a guitar along those lines. Now, the next reason I chose B was because it made more theoretical sense to me. I'm quite a theory-based player, as people who watch this channel know, and it was a bit confusing to me to think of too many different tunings. So to put it a way that's maybe easier to understand, the reason I tune to B on the bottom string is the same reason I don't tune my 6-string guitars to drop D. So drop D tuning, very common tuning among rock players in particular, but also folk players, they often tune down to drop B. One of the problems with a player like me who thinks quite theoretically is that would be that you'd have a 5th from D to A on the 6-string guitar. You'd then have mostly 4ths, and then you'd have a 3rd from G to B. So you would on one instrument have a 5th tuning, a 4th tuning, and a 3rd tuning. And I generally think of the guitar as a 4th instrument. When you first start playing, you don't really think about the 3rd thing, you just get used to it. But when we've got the option to add additional strings, it makes sense to me to keep it in 4ths. Now, what that also does, the benefit of that, is it means the top 2 strings and the bottom 2 strings are the same. So my high 2 strings, B and E, and my bottom two strings are B and E. When we first start playing the guitar, one of the nice things about learning your note names on the strings is the E string and the E string are the same. It kind of gets a little bit confusing adding in, well, this is an A string and then it's an E string and then it's another A string. It seems a little bit confusing to me. Now, in practical reasons, all this means, the only difference is when I'm playing a voicing which has the root on the B string, so for example, a really pretty voicing like this. I now know that all I need to do is this note here, I can play the same note but on the low B string. And that makes things really simple. Now, let's tune down to A for a second and I'll give you another example if it was in A, because it is just as easy. So now I'm in A, I can make the same argument. Any chord where the root's on the A string, so let's play this voicing maybe. And I now just need to match that same fret on the low B, the low A string, there you go. So it is just as simple, but to me, playing with low A is kind of the equivalent of playing with drop D. It just doesn't quite make sense to me. And then the final point to make, of course, is, again, if we stick with this idea of drop D tuning, a lot of players play some songs in drop D and some songs in standard. So two names who come to mind who both play half step down, but you'll appreciate the point. Yngwie and Slash. They both have a guitar that is tuned in drop D tuning, down a step, and in standard tuning. Certain songs require them to play in drop D and certain songs require them to play in standard. And the other guys who do this as well are acoustic guys who do all the slapping stuff, which I just don't even know where to start with. Each song will be in its own tuning. So there's no reason to commit to one tuning. You can just change tuning, or, you know, if you're lucky enough to have several guitars, have one permanently in B and one permanently in A. John Petrucci is another guy who does a lot of riffing on the guitar, and very often he'll be in drop C tuning or B in some of the earlier stuff. And I'm not sure if Petrucci's ever gone down to an A, but maybe he has, who knows. So you're under no obligation to commit to one. If you're happy to keep changing it up all the time, great. Again, personally, I like to just keep it fixed and not mess around with it. And again, for string tension reasons, A doesn't really make sense to me. So in summary, my preference is based on a few different reasons: theoretical, technical limitations, and just what feels right, what just, you know, makes sense to me based on nothing hugely specific. I would be more than happy to play in drop A. I'm sure I'd get used to it very quickly, but B felt effortless for me. I suppose that's the best way to put it. So hopefully that's a little bit of an insight if you do have a 7-string guitar on the way. If you found that one useful, please do give this video a like, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and share with any of your friends who might be lucky enough to have a 7-string guitar. And as always, I hope you're all doing very well, getting plenty of practice in, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers!
Roll up, let me embed a story you'll never forget. A drip, drip, but drowning in debt now. You can't buy your way out, and I heard you find it difficult to cope.